All right. We're gonna jump in and get started here in just a second. Good morning. Hope everyone is doing well out there. Looking to build upon our full stack CRUD application using the latest version of Next.js, Mongoose, and MongoDB. Give me 1 second. All right. We're about to kick things off. I'm just gonna give another minute or two. All right, so to kick things off, let me go ahead and start the project on the local server, and we'll kind of talk through what we already have and what we're looking to get accomplished today. Let's give it another minute here. It should be ready to go on localhost 3000. Let's get this going here. All right. So for those that were in on yesterday's video, know I was having some issues with the Safari browser, so decided to download Chrome to help out with the task of the privacy settings not allowing everything to show up properly. So I hope that we've alleviated that concern. Let me move this over a little bit. 1 second, rearrange this a little bit. Yeah, that should be fine. And then we'll bring it back like that. All right. So what we have is a full stack Next.js application using the latest version of Next. And we're using MongoDB to persist the data and mongoose to help interact with the database. So what we want to eventually accomplish is have a fully functional note-taking application where we can keep track of notes, tasks, a calendar view, etc. A clone of an existing website, if you will. But what we have so far is the ability to create a new column, and we'll design it later. We just wanted to get the functionality in place first. We have the ability to create a new column. That is done by just entering in a title. So we'll say Tuesday work, and we'll click new column. And notice that it immediately appears within the column list. This is done by using server actions, which is the preferred or recommended way to interact with the database from Next.js. No API libraries, no front-end hooks as of yet. And within each column, you can create tasks. So at this point, we have the ability to create a task. So we'll say a video, YouTube video is one task that we want to get done today. And if we add it, we can then, if we add the task, we can then have it labeled within the actual column itself. as a task that needs to be complete. Within the column, we have the ability to update the title. So let's just say we want to change this from Tuesday work to Tuesday task. If we click update, we get the immediate update with no refresh. This is done by revalidate path from Nextcache. Built-in option, no additional plugins, no refreshes, anything like that. Just a seamless, almost real-time feel user experience, if you will. And just to show you that it actually took, if we refresh the page, notice that there's no change with Tuesday task. It is still showing as it did prior. So that is set up to be working just as we want. So today what we want to do is kind of clean up the UI a little bit to help with the layout so that it begins to look a little bit more like what we desire. And we'll also add in some additional features, maybe better off for authentication later on, but beginning we're going to set up, you know what, we'll go ahead and add in authentication first. That way we can have the ability to show a logged in user, and then we'll begin to build out the dashboard and sidebar, all that good stuff. So with that said, we can go ahead and jump in and get started. So we'll go to the better off documentation. And you know what, I think we can do better off Next.js. And these are some Next.js specifics. We wanted to do it with server actions, but I'll bookmark this one. But there, let's go ahead and go to the actual documentation to create the to install the package first. All right, so we'll go to docs, and these are just the options. There should be an installation field. Get started. This may be where it's at. Introduction installation. Here we go. So first thing we'll do is we'll install the Better Off package. And we'll just copy that and go back to the terminal. And we can keep the current terminal running. That's fine. But in a separate one, we'll just paste in the command and install it. Perfect. And next up, we'll need to create a .env file in the root of the project and add the following environment variables. So we don't necessarily need to create a file because we already have it. It also generates we need to add the better off secret to the env file. And the cool thing about this one is it'll actually generate a secret for you. But if you don't wish to use it, just make sure that it is something unique and something that can't be easily guessed, so no one can gain access to sensitive data in your project. So I'm gonna click generate secret. Now we'll copy this, and I actually already have a .env file, so I'll just paste this within that file. And we'll close that out. Next, we'll need to create a better off instance. Create a file named off.ts and one of these locations. So we already have a lib directory, so I'm just going to add it there. And it looks like the recommended name of this file should be auth.ts. So we'll just add that now. And we'll go into lib, add a file named auth.ts. And I'm just going to copy this code as suggested here from the docs, but I know we'll eventually need to add more to this, so I won't close it out for right now. Better Auth requires a database to store the user data. You can easily configure Better Auth to use SQLite, Postgres, or MySQL, SQL, and more. So if we were to use one of these databases, what's going on, my brother? With this one, we're using TypeScript. Yes, sir, using TypeScript in this project. Keep things type safety. Alternatively, you prefer to use an ORM, you can use one of the built-in adapters, and we're going to use the mongodb adapter to persist the data to help us with that, make it a little easier. But you don't necessarily have to, and you can write this custom from what I read from the docs. But to make things easier, we'll just use the adapter. So I'm just going to copy this adapter and we'll import it inside of the project. And then the next thing we'll need to do is, it says to use the ORM if your database is not listed above when supported. This is suggesting that we use the MongoDB client. So I think we can use the function that we already have created. That shouldn't be a issue. Yeah, let's do it. So we'll go import db. This should be coming from dot slash. Let me think about this one for a second. Let's go ahead and bring in the adapter first, and then we'll need to bring the client in on top of that. Use grammar. My apologies, man. Let me speak in a language that I know that everyone can understand. My apologies, sir. So I think with this one, we're going to create a separate MongoDB client instance outside, or function outside of the one that we already have, because I think it gives some configuration issues when you try to use the same function. I think you need to create a separate one, if I recall correctly, with this one. So I'm going to go ahead and create the second one now, a one name client. So within the, hold on one second. All right, so I'm going to create a separate client instance outside of the one that we're using for the function in the project. So within the lib directory, we're going to add a file named mongodb-client.ts. And I'm just going to paste in a simple function that's going to establish a connection and allow us to interact using the MongoDB adapter and the actual database itself. And this environment variable, MongoDB underscore DB, should be already persistent within our .env file, so we don't have to add anything separate. We're using that exact same code. We're just using a separate instance to establish that connection to the database. So I'm just going to save this file, and going back to this, we'll import the client and DB, and this should be coming from mongodb client. And then what we'll do is for the database adapter, as it's suggested here in the documentation, we'll pass client inside of the adapter so that it uses that to establish the connection. And I think we'll need to go with the adapter. This should take a second parameter. We want it to either use DB, and then we'll give it a comma and pass in the client. And that should take care of that. The next thing is to create the database tables. So Better Off includes a CLI tool to help manage the schema required by the library. The command generates an ORM schema or SQL migration file. If you're using Keysly, you can apply the migration directly in your migrate command below. So we're not using that, and I don't actually think we need to worry about generating a separate file, not just yet, because with MongoDB, the cool thing about it, because of the way it stores data and doesn't require migrations, we can actually just build upon the schema as we go, and then once we have it finalized, then we'll worry about the maybe building it and adding on additional fields to the user schema. But for right now, I'm not going to worry about adding any separate to it. So the authentication methods, configure authentication methods you want to use. Better Off comes with built-in support for email, password, and social login. So to start out, we're going to use social login, and I want to use I want to use Google as our authentication provider. So I'm just going to copy this, and we'll just paste in this code, and instead of it being GitHub, we'll do Google. And then where it says GitHub client ID, I think there's a recommended configuration, so I'll come back to it. Next, we'll need to do the mount handler. To handle the API requests, you need to set up a route handler on your server, create a server file or a route in your framework's designated catch-all route handler. The route should handle requests for the path API/auth, and then whatever you need to distinguish at that point. So Better Off supports any backend framework with standard requests and response objects and offers helper functions for popular frameworks. So we're using the Next.js app router. I see they've made some changes to this. So I'm just going to copy this API/auth/catch-all route. And from here, we will paste this into the app directory. So we'll create a folder, and I'll just paste in what I just copied and press enter, and it automatically creates the folders that I need. And then with the caret or the chevron arrow pointing down, we'll add a file named route.ts. And I'll just copy this code as suggested, listed here, and paste it into the file. And this is the route handler code as suggested from the documentation, very similar to Auth.js if you've ever written with it. But this will work. And then next we'll need to create a client instance. The client side library help you interact with the Auth server. Better Off comes with client for all popular web frameworks, including vanilla JavaScript. So what we'll do in this file is we'll begin by importing the Auth client from the package for your framework. Call the function to create the client, pass the base URL, Auth server. If the Auth server is running in the same domain as your client, you can skip this step. So Ours will run in the same domain, but what I'll do is we'll go ahead and just create the file, and it'll basically just be empty. We may, if we if we deploy this project, then we'll change it. But for right now, this will be suffice. So I'll add a file named auth client.ts, and then we'll just copy this code as listed. And since the base URL is localhost 3000, we don't actually need to distinguish that. It's going to be that by default. And then with that, you can export specific methods if you prefer. We don't necessarily need to export it, and this should work just fine. So we'll close out the auth client page. We'll close out the route.ts, and we'll go back to the auth.ts file where we'll need to update Google, pass in the Google client ID and the Google secret. But first, I want to just get the recommended naming convention for Google to be consistent. So we'll just go to the menu, go to authentication, click on Google, and I will just, you know what, we can just copy this directly. We'll just copy it, and I'll just remove the current and replace it. And this gives us the social provider of Google, and of course we can add more if we desire, but Google will be fine for right now. And I don't think we need to always get a refresh token. You can set the access type to offline and prompt to select. I'm not going to worry about that. Well, let me read it first. Google only issues a refresh token the first time a user consents to the app. Yep. If the user already is authorized, your app subsequent OAuth flows will only return an access token, not a refresh token. If you want to get a new refresh token for a user who has already authorized your app, you must have them revoke your app's access. Nah, I'm not gonna worry about that. I'll comment this part out. Click save. But what I do need to do is create or gather a Google client ID in secret, and you can get that for free from the Google console. They do have a limitation on how many console or instances you can have open. So I'm just going to use one that's already existing. So let me go grab that now. We'll just go to Google console. And I think this is the first one. I'll just sign in really quickly. Let's do this. Let me follow through with my authentication here. Okay. All right, we'll click continue. Okay, it automatically gave the pass key. Yeah. We need to skip all this, man. That's fine. All right, cool. All right, so we are within the console. I already have a project created. If you're following along and you need assistance with it, just let me know. I actually do have a video where I'm walking through creating the credentials for this, but I figured most people know how to do it, so I won't waste your time of going through this and exposing more sensitive information. So I'm just going to use the existing project, and I'll go to API. then credentials. And the cool thing is the client ID is already established there. So we'll just remove, actually I need to add this to the .env file. So we'll remove as string, and I'll remove as string. We'll copy the Google client ID, the way the verb or the syntax is written, just to make sure we don't mess anything up. And go back to the .env file, paste in that variable, copy the client ID, paste it in, and then we'll go to the web link. And we need to get the client secret. So let me grab that now. One second. What's up, Mr. Johnson? How you doing, my brother? Appreciate you stopping by. I'll go ahead and paste this in. And we'll go back to copy the Google client secret. And we'll assign the variable name to the client secret, and we have the variable client ID assigned to the client ID. Just save this file and go back to our auth.ts. Let's just see what we have so far. So basically what we have is the authentication method of using the MongoDB adapter to help us log in and persist data within the MongoDB cluster. The last thing I want to do is I want to use nextjs's next cookies in order to kind of help with our server actions, so we can store the tokens and what we need as cookies. So let's just import next cookies, and that should be coming from that better off dash nextjs. And then underneath the social provider object, we'll add a plugin. And with the plugin, we want to use, add a comma here. With the plugin, we want to call the next cookies that we just imported, and just be sure to include the curly braces to call it. We can close this out. Let's go ahead and save this file. And with this, we should have everything that we need to go ahead and implement authentication within the app. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a header just to show whether the user is logged in or not, and we'll come back and clean it up at a later point. But for right now, we're just going to keep it simple and just add a simple header. If the user's logged in, we'll show the log out button. If they're not logged in, then we'll show a login button. Very, very simple. We'll go ahead and work on that now. All right, so close this out. I think we can just go ahead and move to, I'm trying to debate how I want to do this. I think the easiest, or probably the most logical way, would be just to, for right now, just add a header to the page.tsx at the top here. That's probably the easiest thing to do. So let's do that. Inside of the page.tsx, within the initial div, I'm just going to tab down and add a header. And we'll just put the text of header so we can see something on screen. There. And we see it now appears there. I'm not going to worry about too much styling, but I will give it some padding on the X of 4. I'm sorry. Uh-oh. And I'm going to give it padding on the Y of 2. There, that'll be fine for right now. And then inside of this header, I'm just going to have a H1. That reads, let's just name this the board for now. There. And I'll give this flex item centered, and we'll go justify between. All right. And then here we will add off. All right. So that'll work out. So what we'll do is we'll bring the session in, and if the user's logged in, we'll show the log out button in addition to their name. And if they're not logged in, we'll show the login button where the user can log in with the social provider. Give me 1 second. A few things going on spontaneously. All right, so let's go ahead and bring in the off inside of the page.tsx for right now. So to begin, we'll import off and make sure this is coming from our lib directory and @lib/off. And then we'll also import headers, and that should be coming from next/headers. And then we need to gain access to those, and we'll do that within the actual home function. So inside of it, we'll create a const named session and set it equal to await auth.api .get session, and we'll be getting this through. Remove this. we'll be getting this through the headers. And with that, we need to await headers. And we'll call it. Okay. And then within the session, I want to destructure out the user. So we'll say const user is equal to session with the question mark because we may not have one. And then from that, we want to get the actual, not session, but the user. And I think you can even go const user email and set it equal to user with a question mark dot. And yep, we see email because we know that's what's stored from Google is the name, the image, profile, email, etc. So we'll be leveraging that to kind of help us with grabbing that user. All right. And then now we'll just use a little bit of JavaScript to do some conditional rendering. So within the header, within the div, we'll say with brackets, user with a question mark. If there's a user, we want to display something. And if there isn't a user, we want to display something else. Some good old fundamental basic JavaScript. Okay. So here's where we want to show the sign in and sign out. And just to make sure this is working, I'll click save. So if there's a user, we'll show sign out. You know what? Actually, let's do something else first. Let's do a class name of flex, set the items to centered, and we'll go give everything a gap of 3. And then within this one, we'll give a class name because this is where we're going to store the user email in addition to the sign out button. So we'll go flex items centered. And I'll give this a gap of 3 as well. We'll make it 2. So this first inside the div will show a span. And I'll just do the user email here. And we'll give this a class name of font medium. And we'll set the text to neutral 600. And then we'll also show the log out button that we haven't created just yet. But if we don't have a user, which we do not, and that's the reason you don't see anything on screen right now, we'll just show log login. All right. So now let's go ahead and create those into separate files so that we can work with them a little easier. So inside of the project, inside of, we'll put this in the root of the project. We'll create a folder named _components. And in that way, Next knows to just treat this as a component or a separate file that doesn't have any special naming convention. All right. Inside of this, we'll create a file. I think I'll just name this and put everything in one file, at least for right now, Google-btn.tsx. And within this file, this is going to be a client-side file. We'll go use client, and we'll have some interactivity within it. But for right now, let's focus on the sign in first. We'll go export function sign in with Google button, and we'll just return a div. No, we can actually just make this a button, and we'll go sign in with Google. Eventually, we'll put this in a form where the user have the ability to either create a username and password, or they can just sign in with Google, whatever is easier for them. But for right now, this will be suffice. And let's go ahead and just import this into the page.tsx. So we'll go log in, and we'll delete that. And at the top of the file, we'll just go import sign in with Google button. And we'll just add it here. Click save, and then now we see that button on screen. So we'll go back to the component, and we want to add a little interactivity with it. First will be use state, so we can identify the state of the user, and that should be coming from React. That should say a regular React front end hook. And then we'll also grab use router. Eventually we'll do some redirecting once we add a little more complexity to the project. But for right now, this is fine. And then we'll also import off client, since we are using a front end hook with this. And this should be coming from the lib directory. Remember, as we read from the documentation, and because we're using localhost 3000, we don't actually have to, there it is. We don't actually have to add anything inside of it. But once we deploy, or if we need to set the base URL to something other than localhost 3000, then we'll just need to update the off client, and it'll automatically take care of this. So that's something that I do like about Better Off. It's a little more user-friendly when it comes to configuration, a little less involved, if you will. So with the function created, inside of the sign in with Google function, we'll add a const. And this is going to help us manage the actual state. We'll go, and the only state that we want to manage with this is if the profile or the sign in is loading or not, just to show a loading animation. So you don't actually have to do this. It just creates a better user experience. So I'm just going to create the state variable of loading and the set state loading. Then create a const name on login. And this is going to manage the logging in of the user. And we'll pass this into the button in just a moment. But inside of this on login function, we'll set the loading to true because we're attempting to log in at this point. And then we'll go await off client, pointing to the localhost 3000, and we'll get access to sign in. And we're using the social sign in, which is something I enjoy about Better Off. It uses the exact same approach, whether it be credentials or social or whatever, makes it a lot easier. And then inside of this, we have to pass the provider. The provider is going to be Google. And if you wanted to redirect, this is where we would add that redirect once the login is successful. But we're not worried about that right now. But if we do get an error, which things happen, we'll go console.log Google sign in error. And we'll go ahead and just pass the error so we can grab it. And then at that point, we know we can set the loading back to false because we got an error. So there's nothing to show pending to the user, if you will. So with this, that's all we need to log in with Google. So let's give this function, let's pass this function to a method, and we'll give the method to the button. It's going to have a on click, and we'll pass the on login function. We'll set disable to loading. And let's just give this a class name for some simple styling. This part is optional. I just want to add some styling to it. We'll make the background neutral, UTRAL. We'll go 400. Okay, go to text, it'll be white. Padding on the, padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 2. We'll go rounded large. Okay, and I think that should be about suffice. We'll set the font to medium. And then, you know what? If it is disabled, let's set the opacity to 50. Hit save. And the last thing I want to do is just do a little bit of conditional rendering right here. That way the user can see a different message in the event it is loading and not just be disabled. So I'm just going to copy this for simplicity purposes. More JavaScript at this point. So we'll add the curly braces and say loading. If the state is loading, we'll say pass a message of logging in, some dots, or we just want to show the initial state of sign in with Google. So if everything is working properly, and we'll come back and redesign this later, but if everything is working properly, we should be logged in. And based on the rendering, we should see the user that we're logged in with. So let's test it out. We get the loading state. So that's good. And then now it's asking us to sign in with Google. We'll sign in with the account suggested. And saying it was signing back in into the project, and the project that we already had created was not live blog. We'll click continue, and we see we're logged in with the JADAD. So that is the login seems to have worked successfully. But the true test of this will be to see what's actually in the database itself. If we have a user that's persisted, and if we do have a user that's persisted, did it capture the actual user's information? So let me shift over to the browser and we'll check that out. The white. All right. Sorry about that. Had a little delivery. So let's refresh this screen. We'll need to log back in. And once we go back to the database, you see inside of our table, we now have an accounts, session, user, and verification model. So if we click on user, we see that we have a user that's logged in. That's the user that I just logged in with. And all of this was done by Better Off using the MongoDB adapter. Makes life much easier. And we didn't necessarily have to structure it, not yet. And the good thing with this is it also captures the session and all of the token information there. And it also has the account information as well. So it appears that the MongoDB adapter to create a user is working successfully. All right, so now let's go back to our editor and we'll go back to the Google button. And the only button we need to create now is have the ability to sign out. So underneath the sign in with Google button, we'll create a export function named sign out button. And we're going to return a button. And this will be sign out button. Click save. Let's go ahead and import this. So back in the page.tsx, at the top, we'll just add a import of sign out button. And in place, or excuse me, next to the username, we're just passing that component of sign out button. Click save. And then now we see the button is listed there on screen. So let's go back and add some functionality to the actual button. I want to capture the state of the login process the same way we did with sign in. So we'll go use state. We'll set the initial state to false. And we'll give it a state variable name of loading and set loading. I'm gonna bring in router from Next Navigation. We're not going to use it just yet, but I want to have it in place in the event or when I'm ready to add the redirect back to a specific page once the user logs out. Like I said, I'm not gonna worry about it right now because I don't necessarily need it, but we are going to leverage it later on. So let's do this. Let's go at the top. We'll import. We already have the import there. Perfect. So then now we'll go const router is equal to use router and just call it. And then we'll create a function named on logout and set it equal to async. We'll add a try catch block just as we did with on login. First thing will be to set the loading to true because at this point we are trying to log in. And then we'll go await off client. This is pointing to localhost 3000. We'll use the sign out method, one of the many methods from Better Off. Inside of this, I'm gonna go ahead and add the fetch options of on success. Probably a little easier if I did it like this. On success, we want to route the user back to the home page. And I know for right now, we only have a single page application, so it doesn't really matter. But once we add more routes to the project, this will make a lot more sense, and it'll be a lot easier to manipulate versus having to create this from scratch. And then I also want to refresh the page using the router, and it should be router.refresh. I don't think we need, it should automatically refresh. I'm not going to worry about that's a next router. There should be next navigation. There. Sorry, I didn't catch that till it gave an error. So this is just so that for future state we're in a position where we can easily update it. But if we get an error, try and attempt to log out. Go console.log, error, logging out. Perfect. And then we'll set the loading to false. Okay. And then we just need to pass that function to a handler, and we'll assign the handler to the button, and the handler will be on click, and this one is on log out. We'll set disabled to loading, and then we'll give this a class name. We'll go background neutral 400. We'll set the text to white, padding on the X of 4, on the Y of 2, rounded large. Okay. And I think I'll just add the set the font to medium, and then we'll do disabled as we did with on login. We'll set the opacity to 50. And the last thing we want to do is conditionally render a message back to the user while we're trying to log out, just so they know something is taking place and they won't be able to do anything until this is complete. So if we're in the loading state, we want to show something, and then when we're not, we want to show something else. So when we are logging out, we'll say logging out, pass 3 buttons. So now let's test this out to confirm that it actually works. So if we click the sign out button, refresh the screen, it automatically, you saw we had a quick loading state, and then it went to sign in. So we go to sign in, we get the logging in, and it comes right back to the JADAD with the sign out button. So with that, we have successfully implemented authentication inside of the project. So I think the next thing we'll do is go ahead and begin to style this a little bit. And then after we style it, we'll fix the, we'll add a header, we'll fix the homepage layout, and then we'll begin to assign the user to post or to task or columns rather. That way each individual user, this will be considered multi-tenant, each individual user will have their own columns and tasks, and we'll focus on security and all that good stuff. So I appreciate your time and attention, and I'll